Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
So here we go. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the final episode of Geeky Gentleman History Month. This is, of course, the month in which we discuss the contributions that geeky gentlemen have made to history, but that have been ignored by a biased educational system, except not at all. With me today is Rasco, and I'm, of course, your gentle, loving, kind host, Sid Part 2.
Aww.
Oh, indeed. Rasco, what are we reviewing today on this final episode of Geeky Gentleman History Month?
Troy, the director's cut.
Indeed. And so, funny story as to why we're reviewing the director's cut. I bought a Blu-ray of Troy like forever ago when I was working at Goodwill, and because I like Troy, I think it's a good movie. Spoilers for the review. And I saw, oh hey, a Blu-ray, and it's only like $4. Sure, why not? So I did that, and then I was like, okay, yeah, let's talk Troy. And I started watching, I'm like, wait, I've never seen this scene before. That's not right. I've seen this movie a bunch of times. I know this scene's not in there. And I looked at the Blu-ray case, I'm like, it says, oh, director's cut. Huh. So we're both reviewing the director's cut today, which I'd never seen. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's unique to get to take a look at a movie that I thought I knew pretty well with fresh eyes, see a new version of it, So, let me ask you, Rasco, have you ever seen this movie before?
I watched this movie at some point, but I don't know which version of it I watched, and I only remembered like a few key scenes, so I have no idea what's new and what's not new in the director's cut.
It's got a lot of more extended scenes and some scenes that had like previously been deleted. Like when we introduce Odysseus, Sean Bean's character, and he's like sitting on the hill and he plays a trick on the guys sent to come get him. That scene wasn't in the original film.
Okay.
There's other stuff, like extended stuff. And it's crazy how much got cut from it, because I think it's some of the best lines got cut. It's a little melodramatic, but I think that's okay just given the subject matter. But like, a lot of the lines in this are really good. Like in the scene with Helen and Paris, I'm reasonably sure that there's this line cut from it because it's right before the end of the scene where Helen says, "You're so much younger than me, my love." And Paris replies, "We're the same age," because he doesn't get the point she's making. And she says, "I was never as young as you." And, like, that's a really good line. I like that dialogue. So, yeah, I quite like this movie. And I know it's kind of got a reputation as kind of like a stinker. And I cannot imagine why. So, Rasco, what do you think of it?
Really? I have no idea what this film's reputation is. Like, I've never heard people talk about it. Like, I've heard it referenced and people will, like, say, oh, Troy, Brad Pitt, but I've never heard people talk about it critically. So, having watched it again, I like this movie. I think that the strongest aspect of this movie is all of the characters, because even the characters that I fucking hate, I still think are pretty, like, interesting characters on the page. And in the movie, just period. Like, I hate Paris so much. I want to punch him in the face so badly. He's a horrible person. He is the reason for all of this.
Oh, definitely. And it's interesting because like I'd heard people talk about this movie like it's pretty bad before. So just out of curiosity, I watched a review and like people were saying stuff like in the review, the guy was like, oh, it's terrible because it doesn't follow the book, like, at all. I'm like, you know, in the beginning it says inspired by Homer's The Iliad, and it makes no bones about the fact, like, the gods do not show up at all. For all intents and purposes, this is an atheistic Troy movie, right?
Yeah.
Wherein, or atheistic version of the Iliad, where the Greek gods don't actually exist. People just think they do. And this does, like, a really, really good job of doing that kind of story with it. Once you take the gods out, it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
So I just, that it doesn't follow the book, like, plot-wise, is pretty obvious from just the direction they're going with. That it doesn't follow the book thematically, I think is a weird point, because I feel like the thematics of the Iliad are about the horror of war, the tragedy of war, and I think that's still here. It's maybe not as prevalent, and there's definitely also a theme of being remembered, of immortality, that's much more present in this version. But I think they pair pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree. I really like my favorite thing in this movie is all of the kind of positions that different characters have regarding war. Mm-hmm. Like, Hector as a character is probably the character that I most like relate to and like get his worldview, because it's very simple for him. It's literally about the practicality of war. It's like, you defend your country, because if you don't, then you'll just get taken over. It's not about honor for him. It's just kind of about the practicality of war. Mm-hmm. And I love that. For Paris, it's all about love. Like, he's willing to throw just thousands of lives away in war just so he can have his little fling that he wants to have, and I hate him for that. And then Achilles is the opposite side, where, like, he live or die. He doesn't have anything he's fighting for, which is the opposite of Hector. He's just fighting for his own legacy, for his own name. And
yeah, Achilles fights for really Achilles. Cool. And that's really great, because Agamemnon makes that point. Achilles fights only for Achilles. And that is so good. Like, what's really interesting to me is Achilles and Agamemnon hate each other because, as this film presents it, they are the same fucking guy. Like, if Achilles just stopped giving a shit about how he was remembered and just wanted only to be remembered, Achilles would make all the same decisions Agamemnon makes. Like, the reason Achilles hates Agamemnon is because he has no honor, and because he takes the glory from the soldiers, the people that are actually fighting the wars. Like, I love this exchange that Achilles and Agamemnon has, where Agamemnon's like, history remembers kings, not soldiers. I will carve Agamemnon in the stone. Your name will be written in the sand to be washed away by the waves. I'm like, God damn, that is a great line. It is so over the top, but it's so cool.
Yeah, that's the same actor who plays Stryker in X2. Mm-hmm. He's really good in this movie. Yes,
he is. He is, like, everybody is so well cast in this. There is not anybody who I have a hard time, like, believing on any level. Like, even really minor characters, like Hector's wife, when he is fighting Achilles and falls down on the stone, and she just drops to her feet and, like, turns away and can't look and starts to cry. God, that is a great scene.
Yeah, that is so hard to watch. That entire thing is so hard to watch. Because I remember one thing from the first time I watched this movie to now. I'm completely like, I've totally flipped since the first viewing versus this viewing. The first time I watched this movie, I was like, Achilles is a badass. I want nothing but good things for Achilles. Even though, like, I kind of know what has to happen to him, but I'm like, no, I want nothing but good. I want him to kill everybody and just be awesome. Mm-hmm. And I was like, in that scene, when I watched the movie the first time, I was like, is Hector going to kill Achilles? Because I just knew nothing about the movie at that point. And I was like really, really scared that Achilles was gonna die. This time around, I'm like, boy, I know what happens, but I just somehow want, Hector to come out of this. Like, I know he doesn't, but I just, like, maybe he will this time. God.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tense scene. It's also really, really well... Like, this movie is so well shot, so well choreographed in its fighting and its war-making. It's brutal as fuck.
Yeah, way more so than I thought. I did not remember all of, like, the baby massacring and rape at the ending of this movie, dude.
I'm pretty sure that was added for the director's cut.
Okay, because, like, I was like... What? This happens? What's happening? It was freaking crazy. Because that's something you hear about in things all the time. Like, they'll just sack the city and they'll kill the children and rape the women. I've never seen it, and I don't think I've ever seen it actually, like, shown in a movie like that. Especially
when, like, it's characters that were on their side for part of it. Like, one of the complaints I heard about this movie is it portrays the Trojans as just way more sympathetic than it does the Greeks. And I'm like, maybe they're more sympathetic, but I don't feel like it's white hat, black hat, they're the good guys, the Greeks are the bad guys.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't feel like it is too one way or the other. Like, I think that maybe people, just because of how certain characters... their story ends, I feel like people, like, for example, Paris, I feel like makes every wrong decision he could possibly make throughout this entire movie, and I hate him, but he is one of the people that kind of gets a happier ending. I feel like if you read that as, well, that's portraying him as, like, the sympathetic good guy who gets everything in the end, I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like it's sometimes shitty people get away with good things. Like, sometimes it's the shitty people that don't have to deal with the fallout and everybody else does. Yeah. I don't feel like it condemns anyone.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. One thing I do not like, though, is that Paris survives and Menelaus doesn't. Because, Troy is a tragedy in a lot of ways, right? Like, even the heroes die. Like, I understand having Hector kill Ajax to just show how badass Hector is. Part of me would like to see Ajax's story play out the way it does in the Iliad. But the one that, like, I do have the biggest problem with is Paris surviving and Menelaus getting killed by Hector. Because in the Iliad, Menelaus survives and gets Helen back. In this, Menelaus is killed about, halfway through, give or take, and Paris survives and gets to go on with Helen. And the reason I have a problem with that is they throw in a blink and you miss it reference to Aeneas. Do you know who I'm talking about, or did you catch it by chance?
No, I did not, no.
Okay, so I actually got the Iliad right next to me just in case I feel like cracking into it. But if you ever read the Iliad, it doesn't end with the Trojan horse and the Greeks sacking Troy. It ends when Hector dies and his body is returned to Priam. All of the other stuff that you think about when you think about the Trojan War, the horse, Achilles taking the arrow through the heel, all that stuff, that's like, give or take 1,000 years later, written in by Virgil in his tale, the Aeneid. Because what Virgil does is he wants to continue the canon from Homer, and so he tells the story of Aeneas, who escaped Troy after the horse had been brought in. He escaped Troy with his father on his back, and went and eventually began the whole thing that founded Rome.
Mm.
And so that's Virgil, like, rooting Rome in Greek mythology. And so, like, it's really cool that Paris has the sword of Troy, and he straight hands it to a guy who has an old man on his shoulder and says, "What's your name?" "Aeneas. Take this sword. As long as it is in the hands of a Trojan, our people will never die."
Okay, so I did notice that, and I was like, I don't get it. Like, this is going over my head, but I feel like that's like a thing. Like, that's not just a random person. That's somebody important. And I'm glad that you have explained that to me now.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really cool reference, but I think it's problematic when Paris survives, you know? Because then, okay, yeah, Aeneas, I'm gonna need that sword back, thanks, bye.
Okay, bye!
Okay, bye! It's just one of those things, like, it's a little totally inconsistent that Paris survives the war. And I actually wouldn't care too much if Menelaus didn't survive the war and Paris didn't survive the war. I just think it's weird that they reverse it in that way. Also, just because I mentioned it, I would have really liked for Ajax to survive it, because I think Ajax kind of serves the commentary on war that Homer was doing in a really profound way that still resonates to today, because what you got to remember about the Iliad is the Trojan War lasted 10 years, and so they were just fighting every day kind of thing, and no one was winning. The Greeks never got past the wall, the Trojans could never get them off the beach, back and forth. And Ajax eventually went battle crazy, and he went in the fields and just slaughtered, sheep. He went in the fields and just went slaughtering sheep in a rage. But the sheep he was slaughtering, he thought they were fellow Greek soldiers. And when they told him what he did and what he thought he was doing, Ajax couldn't handle it, so he killed himself. And that is, to my mind, the earliest, collection of what PTSD can do to a person. And so it's just really, really a fascinating part of Ajax's character. So, that's kind of, I see some stuff that I'm like, yeah, I wish they'd kept this part of the Iliad. But I think that stuff only really holds true if you've read the Iliad. I feel like this movie is damn near perfect just on its own, you know? Just if you take it as its own piece, it kind of works for itself just fine. I don't know. It's an interesting one to dwell on. Let me just ask you, did you think that the commentary of, war is hell is carried out well in here?
I did, definitely.
Okay. All right, you take us somewhere then.
All right. Well, where to begin? Okay, for starters, how long was this movie? It was about 3 hours, I think.
Yeah, director's cut's about 3 hours or so.
Yeah, so something I've noticed over the course of some of these History Month reviews is that the movies all seem to be around 3 hours.
Yeah, it's a weird trope with historical films, isn't it?
Yeah.
We should do one of the Bible epics like The Robe or something.
This movie earned its length, though, because there are so many characters, and there are so many characters, and to give both sides of the war enough time to where you really get a sense of all of the characters, what they're all about, and what their unique perspectives are, I think this deserves its running time. I think that all of the fighting in this movie, the choreography is really cool. My favorite thing is when Brad Pitt's fighting Hector and he does this weird spin move and he puts the spear behind his neck in the divot of the shield. And he's poking, he's using his shield to hold the spear up, and then he's stabbing forward behind his own neck. And I'm like, that's so cool.
Awesome. It's funny, I watched a couple reviews of the fight and people were like, it looks really cool, but it is so pointless. You would never want to do this in a fight because it's so awkward to try to get your spear back at that point. I'm like, yeah, fair enough, but man, that looks cool as shit. Watching this, because you only see Achilles fight a couple times, and when he is fighting, it's so brief that you don't really get to savor it. So when he's in this fight with Hector, which is the legendary battle between the two sides, he just looks so this is why he's Achilles, right? This is why why people think he's invincible. is because it's such a dynamic fighting style. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and like that's the thing about the really cool thing about like combat. Just years and years ago, like it's what's so cool is that all of these different like places, they're a lot less connected, and the flow of information is a lot slower the farther back you go in history. So what's really interesting is like I imagine there are times in history where one culture just had like a vast and deep knowledge of the art of like fighting and combat and that kind of stuff, and you might have this other culture that has very limited development or understanding of like technique when fighting. So I imagine like in history there are probably a bunch of like unnamed combatants, like kind of like Achilles, who just were amazing because at the time there's going to be so much ignorance. Like how many of these soldiers are really that well trained? So you just have these guys that rise above everybody else because they just have like a better understanding of how to fight. And to go across the ocean to Troy, you really have like no idea like what is this battle going to be like? Like how are these people going to fight us? And I think that what's really interesting is that Hector, he just kind of strikes me as he's really experienced and talented, but it's not like this natural thing that Achilles has. So the entire fight, it's like really scary because you know that he's just inherently going to be the underdog no matter what. And they're just like these combatants from very different places that come together, and they have no idea what it's going to be like to fight each other.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that about it. It's such a layered fight because again, you have all the emotion. You have Achilles who's proper furious. You know, his cousin is dead, and he opens the fight with that amazing line where he's like takes off his helmet and he goes, "Now you know you're fighting." And then Hector's like, I thought it was you. And he's like, "Tonight you won't have ears. You won't have eyes or a tongue. You'll wander the underworld, blind, deaf, and dumb, and they'll all look at you and say, 'This is Hector, the fool who thought he killed Achilles.'" I'm like, God, he's just pissed.
Yeah, and like part of that, what's really interesting, when he has the conversation with his mother, and she's like, if you go there, you won't return, but you will be infamous. What's really interesting about that is that in a way, that's got to be like a weight off his shoulders because he knows that he's going to be a badass before he goes. So, like, he kind of is invincible in his own head. Because, like, when you're told that, you're going to go there and you'll be great and remembered, but you're not going to come back. Well, that's like a weight off your shoulders almost. Like, Achilles is fighting in, like, the freest way he's ever fought before because he knows, like, this is his climax. Like, this is the climax of his life. This war with Troy.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I really like that scene with his mother because, she was supposed to be like, I'm trying to remember Achilles' mother. Yeah, Achilles' mother was a god and his father was immortal in the original mythology and stuff. But, this implication in the movie is, oh, she's like a fortune teller. She's divine in some way. And then there's just the subtext of she's a mother who just doesn't want her son to go off to war. And so she's like, yeah, you'll be remembered, but you'll be happy if you stay. And that's a really, really great scene. There are just so many good scenes in this movie. I don't know how people can't like it. Kills me. What else can we talk about with this one? What'd you think of the scene with Priam and Achilles?
Which scene is? Hold on, who is Priam?
The king of Troy.
Okay, the one where he goes and asks for Hector's body back.
Yeah,
I thought that seemed great. That was such an important scene to get right before the shitty ending that we have. Like, I don't mean like shitty, like low quality, like shitty, like everything goes to shit by the end. That is such an important scene because it just kind of shows you the humanity that inherently takes place when people talk to each other. It's impossible not to recognize their humanity. But war is all about, not recognizing their humanity and just fighting them, because that's the only way you can really get yourself to kill people, is to just try to dehumanize them.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you're face to face with someone like that, also, wait, just another thing really quick. Also, that's great for Achilles' character, because the characters in this movie, they'll change their minds, and sometimes they'll be like illogical because they're over emotional, and then but it's not like they're just being written poorly. It's like they'll change their mind. So like, for example, Achilles is really pissed at Hector because Hector killed his cousin. But then the king is like, you've killed a bunch of people's cousins. Like, you are the king of killing people's family members, probably, Achilles. Like, every man you kill is a connected person. And Achilles, like, understands that, and then is like, I'm sorry, here you go. You can have your son's body back. And then
Priam.
But no, what is Rose Byrne's character's name?
Oh,
it's like,
shit, I don't remember.
It's like, it starts with a P. It sounds like Paris, but it's not Paris. It's like
I thought it was like started with an A. Doesn't matter. We know who you're talking about. The slave girl.
And then he just is like, you're free as well. Like, I just really like that moment, because Achilles is not like this. He's not like a great guy. He's got problems. He's got issues. He's got rage, and he kills people. But he's not evil. Like, he's not in this for this. Like, he doesn't take pleasure in the killing of people. He takes pleasure in the glory that war brings you. But I just like that. They show that he's not just like someone that wants to see other people suffer and feel bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that. I like how much Achilles gets called out, and I really like his character arc in this. Like, when what's her name? Yeah, please Google her name real quick. Well, I like when Agamemnon takes her and Achilles is ready to fight off all the guards to get her back, because this is the character that actually launches the whole story of Troy. Troy had already the Iliad had been happening for like 9 years, and then we start with Achilles pissed off at Agamemnon for stealing his spoils, meaning his slave sex girl. So like when Achilles is about to murder these guards in front of her, I love that she just yells stop, and like that she has another great line where she's like, if killing's the only thing you're good at, that's your curse, but I will not have you do it over me. And he just goes through this great character arc as he kind of falls for her, which, is a major adaptation to modernize this story compared to the Iliad, of course. But he goes through this fantastic character arc as he tries to, as he starts to fall in love with her, and he does get to see how awful what he does is. Like, he gets that moment with Priam that really solidifies his character arc, and then he's just, yeah, this is wrong. And I like that he goes into Troy because he knows the city's going to get sacked to find her and try to escape with her, and I really, really like that.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I looked up her name. It's Briseis.
Briseis. Okay. Yeah, I think she plays an interesting role in this. Let's talk about that. How do you feel? 'Cause this is a trope that I go back and forth on. How do you feel about the idea of showing a historical event? This is obviously more mythological than historical, though Troy did actually exist. How do you feel about showing, something that's supposed to be historical, but modernizing it and trying to, shall we say, adapt the way that people were treated or that people thought for it to line up better with modern people's sensibilities of things? Like, you would have a hard time finding much sympathy for Achilles in this if when he saw Perseus for the first time in his tent, he was like, oh, good. Hold on, turn over, I'm going to rape you for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Which is probably what the average soldier would have done. And I think it's interesting that we see soldiers raping people later, but we modernize Achilles in a way we don't with other characters.
Yeah. Like, it's true. Like, we do this in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Like, if there's a character that you're not supposed to hate, even in things like Game of Thrones, we don't make that character rape people, right? Game of Thrones is a show where people could get raped. The characters are supposed to like don't really rape people in that show. And I feel like for the sake of just like keeping an audience with you, I don't mind it in that case, you know, because I feel like a lot of people might check out of his character entirely the moment that happens. So just don't make him do things like that in the movie. He can be morally gray in other ways.
Yeah, I think what it is cinema relies a lot on shorthand to try to like get you to just follow the story, so they don't want to distract you too much, or they don't want you thinking about the things that they don't intend for you to think about, right? They don't want your mind to wander and think about the implications of this. They want it to be clear and direct and concise. So I think that's usually a lot of what happens, is like movies that focus on historical things and historical cultures will often gloss over some of the uglier parts of those cultures looked at from a modern standpoint. Not necessarily because they want to rewrite the history. I think a large part of it is just not wanting to distract the audience with the part of the story that doesn't really matter.
Or like it would almost misrepresent the story, because at the time nobody would be thinking about that, because it was such a different, like, in the context of the time, if you're telling this story, that is commonplace. So the people listening to this kind of story, like, it wouldn't jump out to them if Achilles were to rape her, but it would to us in a way. So it would be distracting to a modern audience, and it would get your mind off of the point of the story in a way that it wouldn't at the time. And I'm not condoning it at the time or saying, well, it's okay because it was back then. I'm just saying that, like, that would not stick out to somebody of that time in the way it would to us. So you kind of have to get rid of it if you want us to be able to focus on the things that the story is actually about.
Yeah, and like we do this all the time with other more subtle aspects of it. Like there was a great thread that I was reading on Twitter the while back where it's like, oh yeah, you want historical accuracy? Well, how come they're drinking mead out of season in this? And just like they go through all the things that you just wouldn't be able to do. Like, you know, just a lot of stuff like that. And I kind of agree. We have a visual shorthand in cinema, and it's just part of using it. So while modernizing and you know, making things a little more easy to swallow is not necessarily in the name of being historically accurate, it's one of those things where, like, as long as it doesn't contradict or bother the story you're trying to tell, I generally am willing to give it some slack. I think there's a line somewhere in there, but I'm not quite sure what it would be, you know? All right. What else can we talk about? You know, this is an early 2000s movie. What do you think of the use of CG in it?
I thought it was not jarring. Didn't stick out to me as it didn't, like, age poorly as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it was used fairly well. Like, you know, you get the really cool shot of all the boats heading for Troy, and only 2 of the boats are real. And, like, you know, you look at it and you go, okay, so all the boats are fake. No, they're all 2 of them are real. Good luck figuring out which 2.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. The ocean's all real. So it's that thing of, like, you know it's CG, so you know it's CG. But I feel a lot of it really works. It's doing the same thing like Lord of the Rings did, where it's CG generating large sections of the army, but it's actually got some real actors. Like, I think they had some 300 actual actors to play just the grunt soldiers kind of fighting each other on the battlefield at different points.
Yeah.
Was there any shots in this that you really, really liked?
My favorite shot the shot of Achilles just running, jumping, stabbing the guy, and then moving on in the very beginning of the film.
Yeah.
That's just such a cool moment. It's I also this is probably my favorite part of the movie. This is my favorite shot in the movie. When the king is, like, just looking as they're just destroying all of these just monuments and all of this crap. And he's just like, "Have you no respect?" or whatever he says, and then he just gets stabbed in the back.
And
I love that.
I like that they really set up Priam as a very pious guy. Like, when he talks to Hector about, oh, the reason I believe in the gods so much and worship the gods so much is because the gods, from my perspective, saved you when you were a baby. And so I can never not believe in the gods. I can never not trust the gods. And that recurs a lot throughout the movie. Like, when he's listening to his counselors, who is the voice that he takes the most seriously? It's the guy that's interpreting the signs of the eagles and stuff. And he keeps, like, lecturing Hector on pain, on not blaspheming the gods. When it's like, Apollo will protect us. And Hector just snaps out. He's like, how many legions does the sun god control? He's like, do not blaspheme the gods. And then it all comes back to bite him, because Odysseus is, you know, the clever trickster guy, and God, I would have killed for the Sean Bean Odyssey movie. But Odysseus is the clever trickster guy. He kind of is probably aware, and it's all through implication, which I like. He's aware of Priam being a very pious person, so when he crafts his whole trick for the Trojan horse, he makes sure that it's got this religious implication, and that kind of seals the deal for why they bring it into the city. I thought that was great.
Yeah, and also Sean Bean is really cool. I love Sean Bean.
Yeah, he doesn't get a ton to do in this, but I do quite like him. Again, I would have loved to see the Odysseus version, the Odyssey movie made after this, in another world where this was like super crazy successful, and they decided to do the Odyssey as the spin-off sequel. That'd been cool.
Yeah. I was gonna say that this movie, one of the things that I noticed about it right away, and like that I really appreciated, this movie feels like really big. Like, it feels like they went full blown. They're like, we're gonna do a Troy movie. We're gonna fucking do a Troy movie. Like, this is gonna be huge. Like, this is gonna be as authentic as it can be. And I don't necessarily mean like authentic and like accuracy. I mean like authentic in that, like, there's no cutting corners.
Right.
There's no cutting corners on this. This felt like they were all in to make this movie as big as it needed to be, and it totally works on that level.
Yeah, it is crazy. Like, the wall and the gates of Troy is a practical set that they built, and it is to scale, right? Like,
wow.
Yeah, it is a huge... Like, it's not... It's extended in CG, so it looks like it's longer than it really is. But, like, the gates and, like, 2 or 3 sections of the wall are, like, actually built. And it looks really, really cool. But the crazy part is, a hurricane came in and destroyed part of it while they were, like, in between shooting, because, like, before they were ready to shoot the fight with Achilles and Hector. That's, like, the last thing they did. They had to leave the set sit for a while, and part of it was destroyed by a hurricane, and they rebuilt it for that one scene. And it's really, really cool. The production value is absolutely astounding. I never do this, but I watched all the DVD extras for this movie because I was so impressed by it. Like, the sound design is incredible for this film. It's so it's like just the sounds of everything is so cool. All the arrows flying and the swords clashing and stuff. It's great. Like, the sound of Achilles' sword or spear hitting Hector's shield is so freaking cool.
Yeah, and like every time somebody will like every time Achilles will like jump and stab the shield, and you have to like try to deflect the stab. It's like, that noise is a crazy noise. Like, it's like, oh god.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. For me, one shot that I really, really like, and it's interesting because they did it on 2 locations. They were filming in Baja, Mexico, and in Malta. And like, they have a zipline shot of like this army rushing towards the gates of Troy, and in the movie it's all seamless, where the zipline follows the army, it goes over the wall and into the city, and you still see the army streaming in. Well, the city of Troy was built in Mexico, or one, I can't remember the order. The city was built in one location, the wall in another. halfway across the world. But they stream this zipline shot together so perfectly that it's just seamless. It's beautiful. As beautiful and horrifying as the army streams into the city. It's so cool. I really, really love that shot. Yeah, it's a good fucking movie. I will die on a hill fighting for this movie. I don't care what anyone says. It is an epic. It is, in my mind, the only way you can make a better Troy movie is you can't do this premise again. You can't do the, okay, as realistic as possible again. The only way to make a better movie about the Iliad is to throw in all the mythology and stuff and just completely embrace that side of it. And I'd like to see that too, but for what it's trying to be, I think it absolutely nails it. And maybe that's just in the director's cut. Maybe the theatrical cut has problems because of what was removed from the movie. But man, I don't know. I really, really like this film.
Yeah, I like it too. I don't love it, but I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to ratings. Rasco, what will you rate this film?
I will give this film. I just completely forgot. I don't know why. Do we do a 4 or 5 scale?
We do a 5 scale.
Yeah, okay. I was like, what am I on? I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 spears to the chest.
Nice. I'm going to give this movie, I've complained about a little thing here or there. I can't honestly hold enough against it. I'm going to give this movie 5 out of 5 spears chucked just like 40 fucking yards in just a really badass fashion and knocks a guy off a horse. Because that is cool. I remember being in a philosophy class and the professor talked about Troy and was like, God, that movie was so stupid. I'm like, he threw the spear 40 yards and knocked the guy off his horse. He's like, well, okay, but I'm like, no, there's no argument. That is cool. All right, Rasco. Next month we go into holiday month, and I already know that you're gonna go, oh shit. What are we going to be talking about for our fan film / short film for our first episode of Holiday Month?
You're definitely right. This is an oh shit moment. So, has to be a holiday-themed fan film?
Or short film is okay. We're going to open it up just a little bit. You can add short films in there as well.
Gosh. Just use the internet machine really quick.
It's always like this. It is always like this.
Okay. I just found something that might be fun. Punisher the Hostage Christmas fan film.
Oh my, okay.
But here's the thing. I found part 2. I guess it's in 2 parts. Mm-hmm. So the YouTube channel is The Brothers 3, but the second E in the word 3 is the second E in the word 3 is a 3.
Okay. I found it. Sorry, you guys, you get to hear a little bit of that. Wow, it looks like this channel does a lot of Punisher and Dark Knight fan films. Yeah, we'll find it. Well, we should have this. I really want to see that it's actually got both parts. Okay, there's part 2 of a re-edit. There's part 2 of the original. Okay, there we go. There's both parts. We're good. We got this. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the Beta Milkcuck.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.